My name is Daniel Reeves. I am 18 years old. And the first time my mother charged me rent, I was 11. She called it household contribution and took $40 from the birthday money my uncle had mailed in a card with a cartoon dog on it. That was 7 years ago. By the time I stopped counting, the total was $41,216. I know the exact number because I built the spreadsheet myself, line by line, date by date, over 3 weeks in a studio apartment that smelled like fresh paint and someone else's cooking. But I'll get to that. On the morning of my 18th birthday, my mother handed me a black garbage bag cinched at the top with a bread tie. My stepfather, Dale, sat at the kitchen table finishing a bowl of cereal, with the spoon scraping porcelain in that slow, unbothered way people eat when nothing important is happening. My half-brother, Caleb, who was 14, stood near the refrigerator holding an orange juice carton, watching me the way you watch a game show where you already know the answer. "Your room's spoken for," my mother said. She said it the way she might say the milk's gone or the dryer's done. No heat, no ceremony. A logistical update. Dale's converting it for Caleb's studio. You've had plenty of time to prepare. I looked at the garbage bag. I looked at the bread tie. I noticed the weight distribution was wrong. Too light at the bottom, bunched at the top. Whoever packed it had crammed things without folding them. I could feel a shoe pressing against the plastic. One shoe. I stood there holding the bag by its neck, and something in my hands went very still. I wasn't angry yet. My fingers were already inventorying the weight against what I knew I owned, and the math was short, decades short. "Noted," I said. My mother tilted her head, the way she always did when compliance came too quickly. She was waiting for a fight she could use. I gave her a bread tie and a doorway, and nothing else. Before I take you through what those 7 years actually cost, and what it cost them when I finally added it up, tell me, what time is it where you are? Because I remember the time of every single transaction in this list. I've been keeping records since before I understood what I was recording. Some people journal. I reconciled. Drop your location in the comments. I want to know how many people are watching someone finally read the numbers out loud. I should tell you what I do, or what I was already doing at 18, because it's the reason any of this played out the way it did. I am a bookkeeper, not by degree, by instinct and then by practice. When I was 13, I started doing the accounts for my uncle's small engine repair shop, in exchange for $30 a week and dinner on Thursdays. By 15, I was reconciling his quarterly taxes and catching transposition errors in supplier invoices that his previous accountant had missed for 2 years running. I could look at a column of numbers and feel when the total was wrong, the way some people feel a wrong note in a song. My eyes would stop on the line before my brain caught up, and my hand would already be reaching for the receipt. That skill had kept a small business solvent for 3 years. It was about to dismantle my own family's finances. The first time my mother took money from me, I was 11, and the amount was $40. She told me family's share. Dale had just moved in. Caleb was 6 and needed new cleats for soccer. I didn't argue. I wrote the amount on the inside cover of a composition notebook and dated it. I don't know why, I just did. The second time was 3 months later, $60 from my paper route savings. My mother said the electric bill was higher because of my space heater. I wrote it down. 60, November 14th. By the time I was 13, the requests had a rhythm. Beginning of the month, rent. Middle of the month, groceries or utilities I had supposedly caused. End of the month, whatever Caleb needed that Dale's paycheck hadn't covered. Cleats became a travel team. The travel team became private coaching. Private coaching became tournament fees in other states. Each time my mother explained it as shared sacrifice, and each time the sacrifice came from exactly one direction. That brought the total to $2,340, and I was only 13. At 14, my mother informed me that my grandfather, her father, had left a small inheritance designated for my education. She said she'd put it in a savings account for when you're ready. She said the amount was around $8,000. I wrote that down too. Not because I doubted her, because I wrote everything down. At 15, I asked about the account. She said it was earning interest and I should focus on school. At 16, I asked to see a statement. She said she'd get one. She never did. At 17, I asked again. Dale answered for her. Your mother handles the finances, Daniel. Don't be ungrateful. That word. Ungrateful. It arrived every time a question got close to a number. I learned to hear it as a door being shut. The irony is that I spent my afternoons finding exactly these patterns for my uncle. Money that should be in one place quietly appearing in another. Explanations that shifted depending on who was asking. I could read a ledger the way some people read faces, but I'd been living inside a ledger I refused to audit. Not because I couldn't see it, because the client was my mother, and I'd given her the one discount I never gave anyone else, the benefit of the doubt. By my 17th birthday, the running total of direct payments, cash from my jobs, portions of gift money, so-called rent, and emergency contributions was $11,872. I had every entry in a spreadsheet by then, transferred from the composition notebook. Dates, amounts, stated reasons. I did not yet know about the inheritance account. I did not yet know what Dale was billing through the house. I only knew the number I could prove, and it was already more than a teenager should have paid to live in a room his mother gave away on his birthday. That brought the total to $11,872. And we were only at year 6. In the weeks before I turned 18, 3 things happened in quick sequence. First, a letter arrived from my grandfather's estate attorney, addressed to me. My mother intercepted it, but I saw the return address before she slid it into her purse. Second, Dale began renovating the room next to mine, Caleb's supposed new studio, with materials that seemed expensive for a man who told me monthly he couldn't cover the water bill without my help. Third, my mother asked me to sign something she called a family financial agreement. She said it formalized the household contribution arrangement now that I was becoming an adult. I asked to read it first. She said it was standard. I said I'd like a copy. She said, Daniel, it's 1 page, just sign it. I didn't sign. She set the paper on the kitchen counter and walked away. When she left for work the next morning, I photographed it. The document wasn't a household agreement. It was a promissory note stating that I owed my mother and stepfather $26,000 for room, board, and supplemental childcare services provided over 7 years. It listed me as the debtor. It listed my mother as the creditor. The figure was fabricated. I knew my real total was $11,872, not $26,000, but the document was structured to look legal. The formatting used a template. The header included a notary line, blank but present. Someone had built this carefully. I took photographs of every page. I compared the font to documents on Dale's computer. He'd left his home office unlocked, and the author field in the document properties read, Dale RH Home PC. The file had been created 11 days before my 18th birthday. They hadn't just decided to throw me out. They'd been constructing a debt I didn't owe so they could hold it over me after I left. That was layer 1. The garbage bag and the eviction, that was the surface. The promissory note was the scaffolding underneath. I took the garbage bag to my uncle's shop that morning. He gave me the keys to a back room with a cot and a space heater, asked no questions, and said, You know where the coffee is. I worked his books that afternoon like any other Thursday. My hands were steady, my stomach wasn't. But I had a roof, and I had the photographs, and I had the composition notebook with 7 years of entries. The next day, I called the return address from the estate attorney's letter. The receptionist transferred me to a woman named Patricia Linden. She verified my identity through my social security number and a set of questions about my grandfather. Then she told me something that rearranged every year I could remember. My grandfather had not left $8,000. He had left a structured education trust worth $34,500 at the time of his death, with instructions that it grow untouched until I turned 18. The trust had an independent custodial clause. My mother was named as custodian, but any withdrawal over $500 required co-signature from the estate attorney's office. Patricia said she had co-signed nothing. She had, however, received 6 requests over 4 years. Each one declined because the supporting documents contained inconsistencies she could not verify. My mother had been trying to drain the trust for years and had been blocked each time by a woman doing exactly what I would have done, checking the math. I asked Patricia what the trust was currently worth. She went quiet for a moment. That's what I need to discuss with you. The last statement I received from the custodial bank showed a balance of $1,300. I've been trying to reach you for 2 months. Someone had accessed the account without Patricia's co-signature. The bank had processed withdrawals using documents that bypassed the safeguard, documents that included a notarized authorization form bearing my signature. I had never signed it. I had never seen it. That brought the total to $44,416, my direct payments plus the missing trust funds. And we hadn't reached the worst of it yet. I spent the next 2 weeks building the case the way I'd build any reconciliation. Source documents first. I requested account statements directly from the bank, verifying each withdrawal date and method. 5 withdrawals had been processed using a notarized form. I obtained a copy. The signature was close. The right slant, the right pressure on the downstroke of the D, but the crossbar on my lowercase t was wrong. I crossed my t's from left to right with a slight upward angle. The signature on the form crossed right to left, flat. Whoever had practiced my signature had used a sample where I was writing quickly, probably a sign-in sheet or a receipt. They'd missed the one habit I never dropped, even in a hurry. The notary stamp belonged to a woman named Gail Prescott, who operated out of a UPS store 14 miles from our house. I called and asked whether she had records of the signing. She said she notarized hundreds of documents monthly and couldn't recall specifics. I asked whether her log would show who presented identification. She hesitated. Then she said the log for that date showed a woman matching my mother's description, presenting a state ID, mine. My mother had used my identification to impersonate me at a notary. Layer 3. This was not the first time my mother had manufactured paperwork to move money. Patricia Linden told me that the 6 declined requests over 4 years had each contained a different justification: tuition, medical expense, vehicle purchase, emergency housing repair. Each one was fiction. The pattern wasn't impulsive. It was annual. My mother had been submitting fraudulent withdrawal requests like clockwork, adjusting her story each time Patricia caught the previous one. I requested the declined forms from Patricia's files. 3 of them listed expenses for Caleb: coaching, equipment, a tournament in Florida that I remembered because my mother had asked me for $600 toward family travel that same month. I'd paid. The trust was supposed to cover it. She double collected. That brought the total to $45,016. And I still hadn't found what the money was actually funding. Layer 4 arrived through Dale's property tax records, which I pulled from the county assessor's website. The house I'd been paying rent to live in, the house whose water bill supposedly required my monthly contribution, was not owned by my mother and Dale jointly. It was titled under an LLC called Caleb Premier Development. The LLC had been registered 3 years earlier. Its registered agent was Dale. Its listed address was our house, and its initial capitalization, according to the state filing, was funded by a private family education trust. My grandfather's money hadn't just been stolen, it had been laundered into a property entity named after my half-brother, used to shield the house from Dale's previous creditors. The education trust built for my future had become the legal foundation of their real estate scheme. Every rent dollar I'd paid had gone into a structure that used my own inheritance as its cornerstone, while billing me for the privilege of living inside it. The total, when I added the inflated promissory note they'd tried to make me sign, the missing trust funds, the double-billed expenses, and 7 years of payments, was $41,216 in documented losses. The promissory note would have added another $14,128 in fabricated debt. They hadn't just taken from me, they'd built their entire household on the assumption that I would never count. I'm going to take you through what happened when I stopped assuming they were careless and started proving they were deliberate. But first, drop your location in the comments. I want to know how many people are watching someone finally read the numbers out loud. My Uncle Ray was the first person I told everything. He sat on an overturned 5-gallon bucket in his shop, wiped his hands on a rag, and didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "Your grandfather asked me to watch that trust. I should have watched harder." He'd known about the trust. He hadn't known about the withdrawals. He called Patricia Linden that evening and confirmed everything I'd found. Then he drove me to a legal aid office the next morning and sat in the waiting room for 3 hours reading the same magazine twice. The attorney assigned to my case was a woman named Diana Coro. She reviewed my spreadsheet, my photographs, the notary records, and Patricia's file. She said, "This is not a family misunderstanding. This is fraud with a paper trail." She filed an emergency petition to freeze the trust's remaining balance and requested a forensic review of Caleb Premier Development's finances. For 12 days after my birthday, my mother did not call. She did not text. Dale did not reach out. Caleb sent me one message: "Mom says you left. Can I have your desk lamp?" I did not respond. They believed I had accepted the garbage bag and disappeared. They did not know I was sitting in a legal aid office 15 minutes from their house, numbering exhibits. On the 13th day, the bank notified my mother that the trust account had been frozen pending investigation. 4 hours later, Dale discovered that the county had flagged Caleb Premier Development for review after the LLC's funding source was formally questioned. By evening, my mother had called me 19 times. Dale called 6. Caleb texted again, "Mom is freaking out. What did you do?" My mother's first voicemail was calm. "Daniel, there's a misunderstanding with the bank. Call me so we can sort it out before this becomes a bigger deal than it needs to be." Her second voicemail, 40 minutes later, was less calm. "I don't know who you've been talking to, but you're going to destroy this family over money that was used to raise you." By the 6th voicemail, Dale was on the line. "You call your mother back, or I'll come find you myself." He did not come find me. He went to the bank, where he was told the freeze had been initiated by a legal petition and could not be reversed at the branch level. On day 15, my mother appeared at my uncle's shop. Ray was under a riding mower. She stood in the doorway and said, "Tell me where my son is." "Your son is an adult," Ray said, without sliding out from under the mower, "and I think you know where his money is." She left. That evening, she posted on social media that I had been struggling with behavioral issues and the family was asking for privacy during a difficult time. 2 of her friends commented with prayer emojis. My former math teacher, Mr. Kendrick, sent me a screenshot. The confrontation happened on the 21st day, in the house I'd been evicted from. Not by my choice. Diana Coro had arranged a formal meeting to discuss voluntary restitution before criminal referral. My mother agreed because she believed she could explain everything in person. Dale agreed because he believed the LLC was untouchable. They chose the dining room, the room where Dale had installed custom built-in shelving the previous year and hung his contractor's license in a frame above the table. His room, his monument. I arrived with Diane, a forensic accountant named Martin Shore, whom Diane had retained, and my composition notebook. My mother sat at the head of the table. Dale sat to her right. Caleb sat on the stairs in the hallway, visible through the open door, holding his phone. Diane laid the petition on the table and explained the findings. My mother interrupted before the second sentence. "Daniel has always been dramatic about money. We gave him everything, and he kept a grudge journal." She gestured at the composition notebook. "Tactic 1, reframing me as the aggressor," Diane continued. She presented the forged notarized form. Dale leaned forward and said, "Anyone could have done that. Daniel probably signed it and forgot." Tactic 2, denial. Martin Shore placed the bank's internal records beside the form. The withdrawal IP addresses matched my mother's phone. The notary log matched her physical description. My mother looked at Dale. Dale looked at the table. "After everything we sacrificed," my mother said. After the years I spent making sure you had a roof and food and stability, this is how you repay a family that loved you. Tactic 3. Loyalty appeal. The room waited. I hadn't spoken since walking in. Diane looked at me. Martin looked at me. My mother looked at me, with the expression she used when she expected compliance. You didn't raise me with your money, I said. You raised me with mine. Silence. Then a voice from the hallway. Not Caleb. Patricia Linden stepped through the front door, which Diane had left unlocked. She carried a file box. She had driven 2 hours after Diane informed her that the meeting was happening. My mother had not known Patricia existed outside of the declined forms she'd been submitting for years. I'm Patricia Linden, custodial co-signer for the Reeves Education Trust, she said. I have 4 years of declined withdrawal requests, each containing fabricated expenses. I also have the original trust instrument, which specifies that misuse of funds triggers automatic civil liability and criminal referral. She set the box on Dale's shelving unit, directly below his framed contractor's license. I should have reported this sooner. I didn't, and I'll answer for that. But I'm here now. My mother reached for the box. Diane stopped her hand. Dale stood up and said, "This is a private family matter. You have no right to be in our home." Patricia looked at him. The trust gave me a legal obligation to be wherever these documents are discussed. You're welcome to call the police. I expect they'll be here eventually regardless. Dale sat down. Caleb appeared in the doorway. He was pale. He looked at me, then at the file box, then at his father. "Dad, is the house in my name?" Dale said nothing. My mother closed her eyes. "The LLC used to purchase this property is registered under your name," Martin Shore confirmed, speaking to a 14-year-old boy. "Funded by trust money designated for Daniel's education." Caleb's phone slipped from his hand and hit the stair. He didn't pick it up. I looked at my half-brother, and for the first time I saw the thing underneath his entitlement. A kid who had been handed everything without being told where it came from. He hadn't built this. He'd been built into it. I told Diane, "Caleb is 14. Make sure the filing reflects that he had no knowledge of the LLC's funding source." Diane nodded. Caleb stared at me as though I'd handed him something he didn't know how to hold. The consequences arrived the way weather arrives, not all at once, but with a pressure change you could feel before the first drop. Within a week, the bank completed its internal review and reported the unauthorized withdrawals to law enforcement. My mother was served with a fraud investigation notice on a Tuesday while picking up dry cleaning. Dale received his notice at a job site. His crew watched the process server walk across the foundation of someone else's half-finished kitchen. The LLC was dissolved by court order. The house, whose mortgage payments had been made partly with trust funds, entered foreclosure review. Dale's contractor's license was suspended, pending investigation into whether client deposits had been commingled with the LLC's accounts. 2 clients filed civil claims within the same month. His phone stopped ringing for new jobs and started ringing with attorneys. My mother's social media post about my behavioral issues was screenshot and entered into evidence as consciousness of guilt, an attempt to preemptively discredit me. 3 of her friends quietly unfollowed her. The prayer emojis disappeared. Caleb moved through the next months like someone learning that the floor he'd been standing on wasn't solid. He'd been pulled from his private coaching program because Dale couldn't pay. He transferred to the public school team and sat on the bench for the first 3 games, not because he lacked talent but because he couldn't focus. His mother told him the situation was temporary. His father told him Daniel had overreacted. Neither told him the truth, but Caleb had been in the room. He'd heard Patricia Linden. He'd seen the file box on his father's shelf. 6 weeks after the meeting, he sent me a text. "I know they used your money for my stuff. I didn't know. I'm sorry." It was short, it was real, and it left everything unresolved, which is what made it honest. Over the following months, Caleb completed the arc I'd watched begin in that hallway. He'd been complicit, not knowingly, but willingly blind, enjoying the coaching and the equipment and the room that was being built for him with money that wasn't his family's to spend. He'd witnessed the evidence in the dining room. Privately, he began doubting. He told his school counselor he felt like the house isn't really ours. His small, brave act was testifying to the forensic accountant that he'd overheard Dale on the phone once, saying something about moving the trust allocation before the kid turns 18. He hadn't understood it then. He understood it now. 3 months after sentencing, he sent me a handwritten letter. I should have asked where the money came from. I should have shared the room instead of wanting yours. I'm sorry I watched you leave with a garbage bag and went back to eating breakfast. The apology was real. It did not restore the 7 years. I did not write back immediately. I let the space stay open, because rushing forgiveness for someone else's comfort was a pattern I was finished repeating. My mother and Dale accepted plea agreements. My mother received probation, restitution obligations, and a ban on serving as a fiduciary or trustee. Dale received a longer probation term, a suspended sentence contingent on full restitution, and permanent revocation of his contractor's license. Gail Prescott, the notary, was fined and had her commission revoked after the investigation revealed she had failed to properly verify identity on multiple occasions. The restitution was structured over years. I did not expect to recover the full amount. But the trust's remaining funds were released to me, the forged promissory note was voided, and the court ordered my mother to return every dollar of double-billed expenses with documentation. The total recovery, after legal fees and the trust's diminished balance, was enough for 2 years of community college, a security deposit on a studio apartment, and a used car with 80,000 miles and no one else's name on the title. Mr. Kendrick, my former math teacher, the one who'd sent me the screenshot of my mother's post, offered me a part-time job doing bookkeeping for the school's booster club. It paid modestly. It mattered enormously. He said, "You were always the kid who counted things twice. I figured you should get paid for it." I enrolled in an accounting program that fall. I kept my uncle's books on Thursdays. I ate dinner at his table. He never charged me rent. He never called it sacrifice. He called it Thursday. A year after the garbage bag, I sat in my studio apartment with my laptop open to my personal spreadsheet, the one that had started in a composition notebook when I was 11. I added a new column. I labeled it mine. The first entry was the security deposit on the apartment. The second was the first tuition payment made from recovered trust funds. The third was a set of used cookware I bought at a thrift store for $14 because I wanted to learn to make soup. The running total in that column was small. It was entirely mine, and it was growing in the right direction. Dale and my mother separated before the first restitution payment was due. Each blamed the other in the same circular way they'd blamed me for discovering what they'd done. My mother moved into a rental unit and got a job at a billing office, which carried an irony I did not need to name. Dale moved in with a friend from his contracting days and began doing unlicensed handyman work until someone reported him. Caleb split his time between them and spent weekends working at a grocery store, putting small amounts into an account he'd opened himself. He told his counselor he wanted to know where the money comes from and where it goes. I understood that impulse better than anyone. 18 months after my birthday, Caleb asked to meet me for coffee. He was taller. His hands were calloused from bagging groceries instead of gripping a coaching-funded tennis racket. He asked me whether I hated him. I told him I didn't. I told him I didn't fully trust him either, and that both things could be true at the same time. He nodded like someone who had learned that comfort and honesty don't always arrive together. I think about the difference between what a running total looks like on a spreadsheet and what it costs in a life. $41,000 is a number. It fits in a cell. You can format it, bold it, put a border around it. But the cell doesn't show the $40 birthday card, the 11-year-old boy writing in a notebook he couldn't explain the purpose of, the years of hearing ungrateful every time a question got too close to an answer. The number doesn't hold the morning I stood in a kitchen holding a garbage bag and felt my hands go still because the math was already running. Spreadsheets track what moved. They don't track what it replaced. Every dollar my mother took occupied the space where something else should have been. A savings account that grew instead of shrank. a college application filed without panic, a teenager who came home to a room that would still be his in the morning. The ledger is complete now, the columns balance, but there are entries no formula can reconcile, and the ones that cost the most don't have dollar signs in front of them. Freedom from the pattern is worth something the spreadsheet can't hold. It's the Thursday dinners at my uncle's table, where no one calculates what I owe for the meatloaf. It's the $14 cookware and the first pot of soup I burned, and the second one I didn't. It's the column labeled mine, growing by small, honest amounts in a file no one else can access. On the morning of my 19th birthday, I opened my laptop to the spreadsheet. The composition notebook sat beside it, its cover soft from years of handling. I added one final entry to the old column, the one that tracked what was taken. I typed the date, and in the description field I wrote, closed. Then I opened the new column. The balance was $4,812. It was not impressive. It was not enough for everything I wanted. But every cent in it had been earned, deposited, and verified by the only person whose name belonged on the account. I closed the laptop and made coffee in the same mug I'd bought at the thrift store for $2. Outside it was raining, and the window was mine, and no one was converting my room into someone else's future. If you sat down tonight and added up everything you've given to the people who call you family, not in gratitude but in obligation, not in love but in debt, what would the total be? And if you saw that number written in a column with your name at the top and no one else's, what would you do with the first dollar that was finally yours? This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminded you that your dignity is not negotiable, and that setting a boundary, even a painful one, can be an act of love for yourself and everyone the pattern would have reached next.